Okay, good evening, grade 9, to our 2.1 discussion on what rational numbers are. So when we talk about rational numbers, they are actually a whole bunch of different things. And rational numbers are numbers that we can rationalize how they were achieved. That's the way I like to think of it. If you're thinking about a rational number, it's something that makes sense to you from where it came from. So by definition, a rational number is any number that can be achieved when you take a number, and we'll call it A, and divide it by, I can write it like this too, another number, B, as long as B cannot be 0. And there's a whole bunch of different types of numbers that can be achieved when you do this. So let's look at a few examples. Let's say my A value was, we'll say 2, and my B value was 3. So when I insert that into my A over B value, I have 2 over 3. And again, we can think of it as being the same thing as being 2 divided by 3. So what happens when I take 2 and divide it by 3? Well, for some people we can kind of do that mentally, but I'll just show you with a calculator here. If I can pull it up, I'll take my calculator, programs, accessories, where's my calculator? It's right there. So if I pull up my calculator and say, what is 2 divided by 3? It will tell me it's this big massive number, 0.666 repeating into infinity. So the value of this is actually the same thing as 0.6, and we call it repeating. So one of the types of numbers that can be achieved when you take an A divided by B is a repeating decimal. So that's what we call, it's a rational number. I know how to get a repeating decimal. I can take a number like 2 and divide it by 3, and I achieve a repeating decimal. There's a whole bunch of different ones we can take. Another common one is, 1 divided by 3, which a lot of people understand as 0.3 repeating. But a repeating decimal is one type of number. What's another type of number we can get? Well, let's look at some more examples here. Let's look at, let's say A is 4 and B is 2. So we take my A over B, we take my 4 over 2, or 4 divided by 2, depending on how you want to think of it. And what happens when we achieve that? Well, we won't need a calculator for this. We actually get 2. And what kind of number is 2? Well, it's actually just a whole number. So whole numbers, I got to take my eraser here. Whole numbers are another type of number that we can get if we take an A divided by B. So we can get whole numbers. They are rational numbers. We can figure out, we can rationalize whole Mamma mia. Whole numbers are another type of rational number. What's something else we can get? Well, let's look at another A and B. Let's take A as being, 5, and B being 2. If we look at A over B, or A divided by B, as being 5 divided by 2, what does that give us? Well, I'm not going to use a calculator for this. You have to trust, well, let's use a calculator. Why not? 5 divided by 2 equals 2.5. So that's a type of number that we get when we achieve an A divided by A. And that's actually, we can also think of that as being 2.5. That might be a better way to look at it, because when we look at it this way, we probably have a name for it, and we probably remember from our learning last year or the year before. This is called a mixed fraction. And if we want, we can call the other one a mixed number. Right? It has a whole number and a decimal part to it. So we get mixed numbers are also rational numbers. We know where they come from. What else can we get? Well, let's look at some more examples. Now this is so much fun. We can just do this all day. We won't, but we could. What about something like, well, we didn't think about this, did we? What if A was -6 and B was 2? What happens with that? We forgot about examining integers. Well, -6 is my A value. My B value is 2. We get the answer of -3, which is, of course, an example of an integer. And one more we're going to look at, because we can't, as the guy from the commercial said, we can't keep doing this all day, If we look at another one, for example, A is 1 and B is 4. We have 1 divided by 4, if we use a calculator, which we won't, is 0.25. It doesn't repeat, it ends. And that actually is called, it's kind of a cool name, a terminating, meaning it ends, terminating decimal. So what are rational numbers again? Well, just to reiterate what they are. By definition, rational numbers are any number that we can make when we divide one number by another. And we kind of look at it in this form as A divided by B. And remember, the only time it won't work is if B cannot be 0. That's the only stipulation for this to work. Go ahead and try seeing if take 4 and divide it by 0 and see what happens in the calculator. If I pull the calculator up here and say, what's 4 divided by 0? The calculator says you cannot divide by 0. And that's a whole other lesson in of itself. But for right now, we'll just believe me that rational numbers are made when you take a number by another number, and you can't make the second number 0. So that's what it is. That's what a rational number is, and that's what we're going to explore in section 2. We're going to work with all of these types of integers. We're going to work with problems that involve those types of numbers. We're going to add, subtract, multiply, divide them. We're going to work in story problems that use them. We're going to work in order of operations questions that work in them. So essentially what we're doing is we're taking everything that we've learned before with multiplying numbers and so on and so forth, but we're using decimals instead this time. Okay, good luck in chapter 2.